This is The Final Word, Season 16, Episode 4. The last time Adam Collins and me, Jeff Lemon, sat together and recorded an episode, it was Episode 1, but we've had the David Visa episode come out in between times and the Michael Bevan live callback episode, so they count as Episodes 2 and 3, even though Storytime episodes don't count as episodes in a season under the strange nomenclatural and numerological, taxonomical, I don't know how you define it, version of listing episodes that we have on The Final Word. But anyway, here we are. It is Season 16. It is Episode 4 because we say so, and we are the lords of our domain. Hello, Adam. Welcome back from Gibraltar, one of the weird countries of the world, the weird tiny countries that you've been visiting over the last week.
Yeah, British overseas territory. Does it count in terms of how many countries? I think it does. It must count.
You get a stamp in the passport.
Yeah, that's right. Well, maybe not literally a stamp in the passport, given the way that passports work now. But yeah, I'm going to count it on my list, however, whatever we're up to. Not that I'm
did you go in on your UK passport?
I did.
Okay,
I did go
that's
in
why
my
you
UK.
didn't get a stamp, because we drove in from Spain and had to get like a re-entry to the EU at the border, because the Spanish authorities are like, nah, Brexit, sorry, you're not getting an easy ride here.
Yeah, I've sensed that when over there that there's this extra tension since Brexit about when and how one crosses the border and more discretion from border officials and so on. Back to our naming convention, I note that book club also doesn't count. So if we do, even though a book club interview, an interview with an author might feel just the same as an interview with someone else that we might have on the show, because we've decided that book club is its own thing, that doesn't get an episode number, nor do the dailies, and nor do the archive apps. So we've got all sorts of different.
They have one. They just have an older one.
Right.
So they just get their old one installed as they would have been we're back at Season 1, Episode 6 was the most recent one that just went up with our good friends Stefan Schemmelt and Jesse Hogan, which was a nice surprise. Well, not a surprise because I knew it was there, but it was nice to listen back to that episode again and go, I remember that. 2015, it was a long time ago.
That was our last day on tour, I think, Jeff. Before we parted ways, you went off to somewhere, and I went off to. I think I went to France for a couple of weeks, something like that. Well, no, for a week. That's right. I went to France and killed a bit of time, then headed back to watch Hawthorn play in the 2015 Grand Final. That was my sequence of travel. But that's after you and I, having spent three or so months together through the UK and made a handful of those podcasts. It was a special time when we were finding our way, as it was the last few days. You know, Gibraltar, I didn't really know what to expect. So what I'm doing, and I think this was clear from last week, but playing for the MCC, but I'm a probationary candidate. So what that means is I've been accepted by the cricket committee, or whatever it's called, to be able to qualify as a playing member of the MCC at Lords. But I now hit this new threshold where I need to play a minimum of 10 games across 2 seasons and play decent cricket and also be a good contributor on and off the field in other ways. And then I'll have my candidature considered at the end of next season. So, you know, I wouldn't say the pressure is on. It's not like a pressurized environment. But you're representing the most famous cricket club in the world, and you're on an overseas tour and things are done a certain way. And I absolutely loved it. The people you get to play with and take the field with who have done some extraordinary things as either club players or minor counties players, or in the case of a few of my new teammates, they're playing for the England over 50s at the moment. They won the World Cup last year. They're defending the Ashes this year in the over 50s category, with veterans cricket becoming a bigger and bigger thing around the world. I think we probably should do an episode about veterans cricket at some point, Jeff, because it's had a huge effect on participation for especially guys who tend to retire in their late 30s or early 40s, who are now saying, well, actually, I might try and play for my country as a 50-something or a 60-something or indeed a 70-something. I think there's an over 70s World Cup for the first time later this year, something like that. So I found all that quite interesting, and some young guns as well who are also trying to qualify with me. One young fellow who's 18 and looks incredibly capable. He's still a student at school but spent 5 days away on this trip. Another fella who's a left-arm fast bowler and genuinely quick and has played minor counties cricket as recently as last year. So great spread of people to play with. So much fun to sort of get into this unusual world, which I never really knew was available to me. Bowled okay as well, which I was happy with, especially in the T20s on the second day. So the Gibraltar part of this is really interesting to me. They're an associate nation. They're ranked 63rd in the world at the moment in men's T20 Is. But, you know, going back 6 or 7 years, it would have been inconceivable that these guys could have been international cricketers as part of that liberalisation, the definitional stuff there. So played against a couple of guys called Louis Bruce and Manav Nayak, and they were terrific young cricketers, both teenagers, probably 16 or 17. And now they will go on the MCC path. They'll become playing members and do their candidacy and so on. And it grows the game in that way. But they've been playing for the team. They go off for European World Cup qualifiers in the middle of the year. They tour a lot. And all of this is possible because the ICC relaxed the definition of what is an international player. And that's helped incentivise people to put cricket first. So, yeah, across the board, great experience. Very grateful to James Weil, who's the captain who took me on the tour and decided to give me an opportunity. And, this will, I guess, be probably quite a big part of my life over the next 2 years initially and hopefully well beyond that as a player for the MCC. So, yeah, fun times for all.
Weird sort of country, non-country, Gibraltar, like partly Spanish feeling, partly like decaying British Empire feeling, Union Jacks more than there should be. It's a weird joint. I did a little string of like going to odd small countries last year. So I went to Andorra, Liechtenstein, Gibraltar, San Marino, Vatican City were the little territories that I managed to pass through while perambulating around the continent. But strange place. But look, let's get on with it. We need to get into county cricket round one. Well, there was a lot of rain, and you were talking up, was it Durham, Hampshire, as a match of the round last week? Didn't get a ball bowled. It got rained out throughout. Pretty similar story with Lancashire and Surrey, where Nathan Lyon got to bowl 2 overs. So Lancashire are now petitioning Cricket Australia to say that doesn't count as one of the 7 championship matches that he's allowed to play. We'll see where the CA play ball with that. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they didn't, put it that way. You got one result in Div 1. Catch us up.
Yeah, so, well, that first one, the Durham Hampshire game, that means that Durham have not been without Scott Boland at all. So Scott got there during the weekend, did his professional, his headshots and so on, bowled in the nets, and he'll be available when they play Warwickshire when round 2 starts on Friday. And then, at Old Trafford, that frustration. They clearly prepared a pitch that was, I haven't seen any of this, by the way, because I was on the aforementioned tour, but judging by the scorecard, Dan Lawrence, first game for Surrey, with his off-spin, bowled 10 of the first 30 overs in the match. So that gives a feeling for what Old Trafford was. They picked both Lyon and Hartley. Lawrence 4 for 91 from 28 on his club debut. And then Cam Steele, who had a bad game in the warm-up game a couple of weeks ago, with his leg breaks, 5 for 25 from 9.1. So 19 of the first 20 wickets to fall in the season at Manchester were to spin. And when you consider no spinners were getting a game at Old Trafford in the first couple of rounds as recently as 2 years ago, they're preparing pitches that are suited to their overseas player, Nathan Lyon. You're right, they only bowled him for 2 overs. Surrey were 11 for none when they eventually... they were 15 for none. Sorry, they shook hands. They only got 3.3 overs in the final 2 days, which was all a bit dispiriting. So that's where things landed there, the 2 most high-profile games. But the biggest story in Division 1 was over at Warwickshire, this Worcestershire-Warwickshire rivalry that goes back generations. The fact that Worcestershire are back, it means an awful lot. But there was the game within a game. So this ends in a draw, but Worcestershire 360, Kashif Ali 110. Now, we've spoken about him on the Final Word before when we interviewed Tom Brown last year, Dr. Tom Brown, who runs the South Asia Cricket Academy, which was initiated back in 2021 as a way of trying to provide a pathway for players who'd fallen out of the system, or maybe not out of the system, but couldn't quite crack the code of the county club. They were a bridge. So take Kashif. He's played 2s at Leicestershire, Northants, Worcestershire, Notts and Kent. He was an MCC young cricketer. He's played minor counties with Bedfordshire. He's played for the MCC, and he hasn't quite found a way until the South Asian Cricket Academy to find a professional deal, gets one at Worcestershire and rattles off his first-class 100 here in round 1, 110, batting at number 3, brought it up with a 6, and in his 9th game this is. And then we'll come back to him in a sec, because in the middle of all that, Warwickshire applied with 333. So the game was in balance. Ed Barnard made 89, Dan Mosley and Will Rhodes a couple of 60s. But in their second innings, Worcestershire make 395 for 3, and Kashif Ali does it again. 133 in the second innings, twin centuries. Again, he brings it up with a 6. Jeff, I'm not sure that could have happened too often in first-class cricket, where someone making twin tons has brought up both of those milestones with 6s. It's a terrific story. He batted a long time with Jake Libby in the second dig, who made an unbeaten 100. But yeah, welcome back to Division 1 for Worcestershire, who had the better of the draw. And what a terrific story this is with Kashif Ali. And again, they've got 9 players now with professional deals. Their mission is to become obsolete, which I always like an organisation that wants to no longer exist. But this has provided immense awareness to it. And hopefully there'll be more and more young kids, Asian kids, who send those WhatsApp videos through to Tom and his team and say, hey, consider me for your next intake. And we'll see more of these stories through the county championship in seasons to come.
And that was his first class 100.
Yeah.
And okay, so there couldn't be many. I'm sure Andrew Sampson could crunch it, but there won't be many where your first 100 is part of a pair of twin tons in a game as well. So that's got to be a fairly unusual achievement, I suppose. The Kent and Somerset game that ended up in a draw because they lost the first day to rain. So Daniel Bell-Drummond made 100 there, 107 not out in the second innings. Joe Denley made 100.
Yes.
Diamond Joe back in the tons, famous for making tons.
It had been a while. I think it hadn't been like 3 years since 100 to him. Or I feel like he has had a long drought between first class centuries. Jumps out for some reason.
He faced 100 balls a lot of times. Let's put it that way. Somerset had Lammonby make 90, Renshaw made 66, James Rue made 57. There'll be plenty of eyes on James Rue. And the only game that got a result was when Essex beat Notts by 254 runs away at Trent Bridge after a big last day.
Big last day. So they got on day one, which was tough around the country because it rained so much on Friday. But Essex 253, Dean Elgar, who's the new senior pro, on debut there at Chelmsford.
Future redback, Dean Elgar. South Australia want to recruit him to captain.
Do they?
Well, they were toying with the idea. I don't think they're going to follow through with it, but there's some reporting that was being floated.
What a great idea. I mean, imagine what discipline he would bring to a Shield dressing room, an underperforming Shield team. Anyway, Dean Elgar, who's at Essex in place of Alistair Cook, makes 80. Jordan Cox, who's probably more important in terms of the development for England cricket, at a new club as well, leaving Kent, makes 84 for Essex at the first time of asking. Dane Patterson of Fifer, after playing a couple of test matches when the first South African team were out of action in New Zealand. Notts make 293 to get their nose ahead in the game. Joe Clark made 100. Sam Cook, 4 for 59. More on him in a second. Essex, second time around, 374 for 9 declared, including extras. They had 9 scores between 22 and 79, which kind of tells the story there about how consistently they accumulated and got themselves back in front in the game. That was Paul Walter, quite a large man. You might have heard on the Big Bash commentary.
His height is substantial. If only there was some sort of word that rhymed that could create an epithet for him.
And Critch's our man from last year. We'll keep a close eye on Matt Critchley. We're not going to give up on him playing for England. He made 68. So Notts was set 335, and they were all out for 80 in 30.5 overs on the final day. Sam Cook, change going to come. 14 overs, 10 maidens, 6 for 14. Unplayable. I watched the highlights of this. He is a fucking good bowler, Sam Cook. His average since 2018 is 18. In his whole career, 275 wickets, averaging 19.5. He's only 26. Everyone, in Essex context, talked up Jamie Porter as the guy who might one day be the, air quotes, the new Jimmy when Jimmy finishes up. There's probably been about 10 of them over the last 10 years because he doesn't retire. But maybe,
If I may interject there, I don't know if you probably didn't have a chance to listen to the archive, but there is a moment there in which you say, you're talking about what England might be doing looking ahead to 2016, and you say, well, James Anderson won't be around forever. 9 years later, and he's still there.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would have said. Well, go Jimmy, go. He might still be going when he's 47, and it might be that Cook doesn't get a chance. But he deserves consideration. We heard Rob Key, or we read from Rob Key in the Telegraph last week and spoke about it on the pod, that they want to put all these test matches into the 85 mile an hour crew, which is fine. That makes sense with Australia on broadly on the horizon. But let's not forget that England play more than half their test cricket in England, and Cook in English conditions. I know he's not rapid, but Australia made this mistake for a while when Darren Lehmann was coach and Peter Siddle was routinely left out for not being quick enough, and others as well, Chad Sayers, when they were two of the best bowlers going around.
Well, among other mistakes is more what I was getting at.
Yeah, but other bowlers too, right? There was this whole idea of you bowled 140 or fuck off, right? Well, Sam Cook doesn't bowl 80 mile an hour often, although he's not slow. But he's also not a dibbly-dobbly Darren Stevens 70 mile an hour bowler either. He's very competitive. 10 wickets here, and he's been in a lot of successful teams. So I do wonder whether a performance like that to start the season will keep his name front and centre. Jeff, over to Division 2.
Yeah, Division 2. Well, there was one big story we were interested in. We have talked a lot about Sam Northeast, North by Northeast, and the 410 that he made not that long ago. Well, Christ, he was at it again. And we've talked through why triple hundreds are usually mostly junk. Here we are, run fest, draw, rain around, but Sam Northeast makes 335 not out. It is apparently the earliest in the season anyone's ever made a triple. There have only been 2 other triple hundreds made in April in county cricket. So he starts the season with a bang, and he'd have to be a good shout to make 1,000 before the end of May because he's got 335 of them in one knock. Half a dozen sixes, 36 fours, as Glamorgan racked up 620 for 3, and it's the highest first-class score ever at Lords. It goes past the Gooch with 333.
A little bit like what Warner did at Adelaide. So when he got 1 run beyond Taylor and Bradman, they declared. In this case, he went 2 runs beyond Gooch's famous 333. But it's the highest county score.
Don't want to go far beyond the Gooch. That way danger lies.
It's the highest county score at Lords in 98 years. I had a look at this before. Jack Hobbs made 316 not out there in 1926. So, 98-year record broken on that front. There have been 2,800 first-class games played at Lords, and South East now has the highest score. So, it was a run fest and all the rest of it. But when you consider he made 166 not out in his last innings last year, 335 here, that is the 501. That's the Lara 501 not out across the 2 innings. And he finished with 14 not out in the second innings as well. So he's already got 349 unbeaten runs in the season when talking about 1,000 by the end of May. But Middlesex, just to them for a moment, they don't look like a balanced attack. Bamber, Higgins, Helm, Roland Jones, Henry Brooks, who's been recruited. That's 5 seamers, right? Then the spinner, De Cares, who I felt for, he's back to earth to an extent because he had those big bags last year, but none for 100 and lots from lots. But he had Northeast stumped on 291, and Jack Davies wasn't able to complete it. So he should have had a 1 for at least, and denied
291. That would have been Viv. That was Viv at Lords.
Viv at Lords in 76. And then, guess what? Middlesex going to make 655. So Glamorgan batted for 139 overs for their 620. Middlesex batted for 211 overs for their 655. Higgins, who it beggars belief that he left the club in hindsight. I know there were other factors with Franklin captaining and as the all-rounder in the side at the time. But now Higgins has been back and had 2 great years. 221 to start his campaign. Stoneman 97, 3 other half centuries. And they shook hands with Glamorgan 33 for 2. As Andrew Miller put in his Cricinfo report, it might well be that Sam becomes the new James Hildreth, right? The best player in the country never to play a test match. But he's young enough. Like at 34, the game's changed on this front. You don't get binned off at 30, 31, 32. If you haven't made it yet, you're not going to make it at all. There is room there for him. It's just a matter of whether an opportunity presents itself. But after the quadruple 100 a couple of years ago, the triple here, he's making sure that he's being talked about. That's not for nothing.
Right. Leicestershire had a draw at Leeds where there was a fair bit of rain. Not a lot went on. Ben Mike, the guy with 2 first names, made 90. Marcus Harris, who's jumped around clubs again, made 56. Peter Hanscom, 26. And then for Yorkshire, Harry Brook comes in and bangs 100 off 69 balls. The game wasn't going anywhere, but he hasn't. I don't think he's played a proper innings since December. He pulled out of the IPL because of a death in the family. He wanted to stay closer to home, and just comes out and knocks up 100 in 69. No worries there. I mean, it is ridiculous what he's able to do at times. And Northants had a draw down at Hove as well. A lot of runs being scored there too.
You'll like the quirky bit of Yorkshire declaring at 264 for 6. They declared with a little bit of time to go in order to fix up their over rate from the first innings. So instead of getting another batting point, they pulled out and bowled 7.2 overs with Dan Moriarty, their new spinner, who they recruited from Surrey, and Adam Lythe bowled 7 speedy overs to try and help with their over rate, which is
who also made 100.
He did.
One of the more overshadowed runnable hundreds you could make. Not that it mattered much.
Yeah, very canny cricket, but Brooke looked superb, didn't he? I watched the highlights of that as well. So there's the rained-off game at Derbyshire against Gloucestershire. No balls bowled there. Only the first time since 1981 where they've had a full washout up in that part of the world. And yeah, that last game, Northants, high-scoring draw at Hove. They made 371, the visitors, with Luke Proctor top scoring. Kieran Nayer's back for Northants this year, the Indian international. Sussex made nearly 500 with Tom Haynes. He's a gun, made 133. James Cole's had a good game, 6 wickets and a half century. And Ollie Robinson took 2 wickets in each innings from an England perspective. So that was a draw as well. And no actual wins in Division 2 and just 1 win in Division 1. So hopefully the rain stays away sufficiently that we get a more competitive round in starting Friday.
And Xavier Bartlett's been pulled out of an England deal as well as this sort of heavy-handedness with Nathan Lyon. And so he just got announced as having a national contract last week. Those contracts came out and now CA's wielding the red pen again.
It's kind of the downside of having a contract, right? Like it's brilliant to have that security, but look, I'm not a huge fan of the way this has played out for Lyon or Bartlett. That they've had their wings clipped in this way, but I suppose that's the prerogative of the national board. It's been a pretty busy week of England news. I'm going to skip through a couple of the items. So Will McPherson had a story that they're now working on plans to safeguard players if a county club goes out of business. There have been a number of rugby clubs that have gone broke. Like the fact that they're even talking about this is kind of slightly chilling. I mean, no one wants it to come to that, but I suppose at least the players
I'm sure you'd
will
find some people at the ECB who'd be quite happy for a few of the counties to go out of business.
No, yeah, quite. But yes, maybe not the people who work there, but maybe some who are around and about. The story this week from an off-field perspective was that the national government, have contributed £35 million to grassroots cricket facilities, which is great stuff, right? I know the ECB have been hoping for a big government cash injection for a while now. So the idea is with this money, they'll be able to get 1 million more people playing in the next 5 years. It'll include 16 all-weather domes. They're being prioritised in inner city and low SES areas, and that includes 14 million quid to share across the tabs, ACE, and Chance to Shine. So, who knows the extent to which this will be rolled out and when it'll be rolled out in relation to the election later this year. But the very fact that government is getting involved to try and get more young people playing cricket is something that we should all welcome. And great that the Tabs are part of this. We're, of course, trying to raise £30,000 for the Tabs right now. But we're up to 5, by the way, Jeff. £5,000 already for the half marathon. Get in there and donate today. But,
domes.
I was pleased to see it.
More domes. This is what people have been crying out for more domes. Paulie Shaw is going to run the program. He's got a lot of experience in the dome area. The Bomb Funk MCs will be coming straight off the top of the dome as they rock the microphone. It's going to be a big few years for cricket as we dome up. Time to DOME.
What was the Paulie Shaw movie called again? Was it
Biodome?
Biodome. Oh, we should go back and watch that. We should do. We remember we were talking about doing film reviews at one point. Biodome deserves to get a run. Maybe that's another type of show that we can roll out at some stage, along with our sliders recaps that I am quite keen to do at some stage. One other story that's noteworthy here, Jeff, is that the ECB Chief Executive Richard Gould says they are now actively seeking private investment for the 100 clubs. So not the comp, but the clubs. So the way I read that is they'll get a chance to sell it twice. They'll sell the clubs first and the comp second, and everyone will make a bonanza, and it'll be the usual suspects from presumably the IPL conglomerates who will take full advantage of that. Jeff, that's our very, very quick lap around the United Kingdom. And Jeff, we have one more bit to get to before our first break.
It is Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge, the game we play with nice people on the internet who fund this program. You can do it too. Anybody can play this game. They send in a number. They send in an amount in a currency of their choice, which helps us fund the show. And at the same time, it's a number that hints at cricket. Sometimes they send us a clue. Sometimes they don't. Shaun Ton, repeat offender on the show. Tons of fun. Has sent in $2.90 in Australian $1 dues. So $2.90 is the number. What does the clue say?
Yes, the clue reads, my next pledge won't be another Victorian. It will be $2.90, read as 29, and is of a person who was some lawns named in her honour at an Australian oval. The number refers to a test record she holds. I often take my 2 boys to the Sheffield Shield and State One-Day games, and because it's rather quiet in the crowd department, it means we can have a hit out the back on these perfectly maintained lawns in between stints of watching some fantastic state cricket.
Well, you and I, Adam, have shot a lot of daily shows on these very lawns, on the edges of the lawns that sit in between the riverbank stand and the indoor sports centre that's on, was it Anzac Parade, the one that runs along the river
Memorial
there?
Drive, isn't it?
Memorial Drive.
Yeah, where the tennis is. Mark Woodford there in the Rio International doing his thing. Leighton Hewitt beating Andre Agassi.
Making a storming season on hardcourt, an unexpected season on hardcourt for Quinn. Now, the centre, the indoor centre, is named for Chappelle's favourite Les Favell and for Neil Dancy, who I don't think we've talked about much on the show before, but played a lot for South Australia. Never quite made it at Test level, but was there and thereabouts for a long time. The lawns are named for Lynn Fullston, which are outside that area of grass where you often see a whole lot of kids running around playing their own little pickup games there. That was happening at the end of the last Test match. Lynn Fullston is not with us anymore. She was 52 when she died back in 2008. Had cancer for a long time and died too young for somebody who'd contributed a huge amount, especially to South Australian sport. But we talk a lot about football cricketers on the show. She was a cricketer, a netball cricketer. So she played netball for Australia and played cricket for Australia, dual international. And it also made me realise how lucky we are with stats in cricket, because I was trying to find information about her netball career, and I don't know if there's a cache out there somewhere, but it was very hard to find any sort of information on Australian netball representatives, how many games they played, what their careers have summed up. It wasn't something I was able to turn up in the time that I had to research this answer. But in cricket, we do have those numbers. Lynn was mostly known as lefty. She was a left-hand bat and a left-arm spinner, and left-handedness is rarer in women than in men. So, you see it less often in women's cricket that you have the genuine left-handers. Yeah, did you not know that? Oh, it's statistically, it's I think it's almost twice as prevalent in men than in women.
So that's right. So that would mean that being a left-handed cricketer, because we know already that there's a selection bias towards lefties in say short form cricket. So if you're a left-handed woman playing the game, you're even more likely to be the beneficiary of like calls breaking your way and stuff like that.
Yeah, you would assume so, and to be a player that other players struggle against, right? Because there are so you've often seen that England women's team the last few years being all right-handers all the way down.
Yep.
Because there are just fewer left-handers to pick from. So, and Australia have had more left-handers for whatever reason that is.
So no women's section at the Leftorium then.
Yeah, it's just harder to turn a profit from that extremely profitable business. Anyway, Lynn Fullston she got into cricket at Teachers College, got involved with local cricket clubs, and was one of those kinds of people who inevitably ended up captaining a side pretty much as soon as she got into it. One of those kind of natural leader characters. Mm-hmm. Didn't start playing cricket until 1977. Within 2 years, she's playing for the state, and by 1982, she's playing for Australia at the World Cup in New Zealand. So she debuts during that World Cup and then leads the tournament for wickets, takes 23 wickets at 12 through the tournament. And with the bat has a lot of little not outs, little cameos at the end. So she ends up third on the batting averages as well with 41, having only been out a couple of times. She stays in the team for 41 one-day matches. So 41 comes up a lot in her career. She plays through until the World Cup in 88, tops the wickets again, 16 wickets at 11. And then calls it a day. So she ends her career with 73 one-day wickets. She's still in the top 10 for Australia all time, despite having only played for about 6 years. It's an extraordinarily prolific run. And she had the record in all World Cups with 39 wickets until the last World Cup, when Julian Goswami finally managed to go past her and got up to 43. But Julian Goswami played for 17 years, and it took her 14 more matches than it took Lynn Fullston to break Lynn's record. So, it was this brief period in the 80s when there was a lot of women's cricket to play, and that's borne out in her Test career as well. She starts in 1984. They play 4 Tests touring India, and then at the end of 84, England visit Australia for a 5-Test Ashes series, still the only time that's happened in women's cricket. And then Lynn Fullston goes to England for 3 more Tests in 1987. Hard to get results in those days, 4-day games, drab pitches at the edge of the square. The India matches are all draws, all 4 of them. The Ashes, the 5-match Ashes series, they managed to win 2-1, and then they go to England and win that 3-Test series 1-0. A lot of bowling for Lynn Fullston. 602 overs in 12 test matches. So she averages 50 plus overs a test.
Wow.
As a left-arm spinner. And that's as well as averaging 31 with the bat. So in test cricket, she takes 41 wickets, that number again, an average of 25. The number I'm looking for, though, is 29. So where does that come in? The India series, in the fourth test of that series, Adam, she's already had a heavy workload coming into the final test. India really don't want to lose, and they get to bat first, and they bat slow, and they bat long because they just want to make sure Australia can't win this game. So they bat out 192 overs, scoring at less than 2 runs an over. Lefty bowls 67.5 overs herself, takes 4 for 80, finally bowls them out. Australia bat through to an 18-run lead and declare. Lynn Fullston, 31 not out, her highest test score. India dead bat again for 102 more overs and then declare at 7 down. Lynn Fullston, 45 more overs, 3 for 81. And then chasing 218, Australia have a little collapse. They're 6 down. They might lose the game. And who should save the day but Lynn Fullston with 31 not out again. So she makes her highest score twice in the test. And she sets the record in that match for the most balls ever bowled in an innings in women's test cricket, 407 balls in the innings, 677 balls in the match, which is also still the record. She's 6th all-time for career deliveries in test cricket, despite having only played a dozen tests, 3,610 balls sent down. And across 1984, across those 7 tests she played, she sets the record for the most wickets taken in a year in women's tests, 29 wickets taken in the year. I think it's 6, might just be 6 tests in that year. And that's still the record to this day as well, and probably will be for a much longer period of time. She's the first Australian woman who ever takes more than 100 wickets across formats in that short career that she plays for Australia. And then she goes back to Adelaide, gets back into teaching. She's been doing that throughout the whole time, really. Invests her energies in coaching. She's a life member at the Garville Netball Club. She coached the Port Adelaide Cricket Club. At one point, their women's teams won all 3 of the flags in all 3 of the divisions, mostly apparently because they were just afraid of what Lynn would do if they didn't. She was known as being an unflustered character. One story is that she's halfway through a bowling spell when her spikes rip out, so she just takes off the shoe and throws it away and finishes bowling in her socks. She's a spell for the day. And, it was sad that she wasn't there when the dedication was made at the Oval, which I think was about 2014. Or even later than that, her mum, Betty, was able to attend. She was 88 years old at the time. And her line about Lynn, as she got up to speak, was, she wasn't one for all the attention, really, but she loved her sport. So it's nice that there's a lovely portrait of her up at the lawns there with her cricket kit, with her bat ready to go. And it's a prodigious career, really, for someone who didn't stick around for year after year after year, but who did a lot in the time that she was in the Australian team.
Terrific. Thank you, Shaun Ton, for giving us the chance to talk about Lynn Fullston. If you are a new listener to the show, maybe you're one of my teammates over the weekend tuning into The Final Word for the first time. We do a lot more of these on our Storytime episodes. We made 176 of them. Another one coming up this weekend, The History of the Game. Contribute to it, patreon.com/The Final Word. Put in a pledge and help support the show as well. All right, time for a break. On the other side of it, we move from the UK to the wider world. It's The Final Word with Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon. Before we get into talking about a lot of white ball cricket that's being played and some other bits and bobs as well, a word for serious cricket, your one-stop cricket shop, recognised nationally in the UK as the go-to place for all things cricket equipment, teamwear and coaching. Specialised retailer. They offer an extensive collection of high-quality bats, pads, gloves, helmets. You know the drill. If you play cricket, and this time of year, you are probably, Geoff, topping up your kit. It's rained last week. That was annoying. It'll rain this week. That'll be annoying as well. However, get into May, get into June. You want your new gloves. You want your new pads. You want to wear them in a little bit. This is the time to do it. All the brands you would normally know of. And because you're listening to our program, you can tuck in to a discount throughout the course of the month of April.
Look, you're serious about it, all right? I mean, yes, cricket's fun. It's a good time. It can be silly. We can have a good time, but you can also be serious. You can get serious that you need to get the right equipment. And so that's why serious cricket are serious. That's why they teach you how to put your pads on, how to knock your bat in, how to bowl a leg break, all that kind of stuff on YouTube. They tell you about the equipment because it can be intimidating when you walk into the shop and you don't want to seem like an idiot. And it's like when you go to the mechanic and they say words and you don't understand them and you nod and smile and go, yes, carburetor. No one wants to look like an idiot, but you can find out before you go in so that you feel more comfortable. And you can just order things online as well, so you get your 10% discount with the code, which is in the show notes, final word 24 at checkout, and you can find the link in the show notes. Click through.
And you can also look at their YouTube page, over 3 million views. Sorry, I've been watching more of it this week. Jeff Hinders, who is one of the pros there in the shop, watching him bowl his off breaks on YouTube and trying to take something from that. In fact, they've agreed to let me go down there and do a coaching session with him, which they'll put on that YouTube channel, which I'm enjoying so very much. So, bit of a crossover coming there, but yes, you can see what they do there. Go down and get yourself some cricket kit. 10% off at this time of year, by the way. No one's giving discounts in April. The season starts in May. This is why you should cash in right now. Final word 24 at checkout. Couldn't be more straightforward in the show notes. seriouscricket.co.uk.
It is the final word, the weekly show, the one that doesn't have another name. It's just the final word. Here it is. It's episode 4 of season 16. Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins with you. Some really sad news that came through during the week about Kaia Arua, who died this week at the age of 33. A player for Papua New Guinea, who was playing for the national team as recently as January in the Pacific Cup. Just a heartbreaking story. A couple of children left behind as well. And the second young Papua New Guinea player to die recently, Kopi John in 2019, died at the age of 25. And Kaia Arua is somebody who you had a bit to do with during the Fairbreak International as well.
Yeah, I'm just devastated about this. It's horrible news, dying at 33 of tuberculosis. It's just something that reinforces the inequity and disparity of wealth in the world more widely, but how we see it manifested in cricket as well. It would be inconceivable for someone to die of that where we live, where we're privileged enough to live. But she was such a wonderful presence around those 2 Fairbreak Invitationals. I can't tell you how excited we got on commentary whenever she came on to bowl her left arm wrist spin, which was effective, and how hard she hit the ball. Susie Bates was her captain for the Falcons and gave her a couple of opportunities batting at 3 or 4 and just was trying to give absolutely everything. Super dedicated cricketer. They loved her in that Falcons team, which included, I mentioned Bates, but Danny Wyatt, Chamaria Tapatu, Sophie Devine, Mariko Hill, people who we've spoken about or spoken with on the show before. And this is just a dreadful tragedy that she died so young. She took more T20 wickets for PNG than anyone else, with 59 of them. She was their captain when they reached T20 international status. We mentioned earlier in the show about Gibraltar. Well, women got that recognition as well in 2018. She was their inaugural captain when they were playing T20s as official internationals. Yeah. And look, we mentioned last week that they beat Zimbabwe only days before she passed away, 3 days before she passed away. The national side beat a full member in Zimbabwe. It's inconceivable without Kaia's leadership they would have been in a position to have achieved that. So farewell to her. The sort of person you would see around the breakfast table in the morning with lots of other people around her. Such a big personality, and it's just horrible this has happened. And you can tell the cricket PNG community is really grieving at the moment, and same with the wider Fairbreak world, and probably anyone who's come in contact with her. Rest in peace. Yeah,
it's enraging that anybody should be susceptible to that disease in the era that we live in. It seems inconceivable. It should be inconceivable, and yet it isn't. It's a tragic piece of news coming through. Roberta Moretti is stepping down as the captain of the Brazilian women's team. She's been in the job for such a long period of time. I mean, it was years ago that we were chatting to her and to Matt Featherstone about the program that they've been building there in one city in Brazil, first of all, and then trying to work out how they could grow the game, grow the team. They've had so much good publicity and so much goodwill over that period of time, 7 years that she's been, effectively mothering the rest of those players and being the leader and being such a hard worker. Anybody who follows her socials would see the amount of time she spends on training, the dedication in the nets and so on. It feels like a real end of an era that she won't be skippering Brazil anymore.
Yeah, so Roberta, again, another one of the fair break veterans, and having spent a lot of time with her and having had her on the podcast a couple of times, like, she has done more for the promotion of Brazil cricket than anybody. And it's a job bloody well done. Proud to call her a friend. And, she's about my age, I think, Roberta, maybe a year younger than me. So it's the right time for them to be making that transition away. You can see how she is with Laura Cardoso, right? Who's probably 20 years younger than her. Laura made 100 this week, by the way, which I was just so chuffed to see her career moving in the right direction. And, Roberta's so emotional about these younger players having found a way to have these professional careers. And, we've told that story on the pod before about how that side became professionals before the men did. And in no small part due to the way they've promoted themselves and given themselves the chance to be known and have their story told. And Roberta's front and center of all of that. So I don't believe she's retiring. You can't keep her off the field. She'll keep playing those reverse sweeps and those switch hits until she can't play them anymore. But I believe the new captain will be named in the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep a close eye on the Brazilian team through the rest of 2024.
The Australian women's contract list came out a week after the men's did, pretty much as you'd expect, I suppose. Basically, everyone's an all-rounder. If you're looking at, you've got two wicket keepers effectively in Elisa Healy and Beth Mooney. Phoebe Litchfield is the only specialist bat in the entire list because everybody else can bowl. And in terms of bowlers who don't really bat much, Darcy Brown, Taylor Valamek, and Megan Shute, and they want Brown and Valamek for that youthful pace and the ability to bowl the short ball and so on, and shoot going around for another year with that massive in swing. And then everyone else is pretty much an all-rounder. The seeming all-rounders in Perry, Sutherland, McGrath. Kim Garth gets a spot. She's been rise recently. And Heather Graham as well, who's always that fringe player in those squads that manages to get a central contract. And then the spinners who can all bat, really, Ash Gardner, Grace Harris, Jess Jonathan, Alana King, Sophie Molyneux, Georgia Wareham. That's probably the main point of interest in the spinners department, is that Molyneux's on the contract list. A lot of game time tips for her. But Jonathan's held a place despite being squeezed out of that recent Bangladesh tour and sitting on the bench through the South Africa series. So they haven't fully got rid of Jess Jonathan as a contender, but she's not going to be preferred for the time being. No Amanda Wellington on that list with Wareham and King, the two leg spinners, which is sort of, we've come to expect it, I suppose, despite the remarkable feats that she continues to produce domestically.
Yeah, that's right. And that's how I see it as well, that Amanda Wellington could take 50 wickets in the WBBL. It'd be neither here nor there. They've made their minds up on the two wrist spinners at this stage, King and Wareham. And look, in that in those last couple of T20s in Bangladesh, Georgia Wareham got promoted in the fourth of five, or was it the second or third? I can't remember anymore. Either way, it was the penultimate T20, comes in at number 3 and smashes 57 from 30. So again, it reinforces that incredible depth that they have at the moment. But I'm so happy to see Heather Graham get an opportunity. I sort of feel like she's in that Nicola Carey role that Nicola Carey had for a couple of years there, where if ever they need someone to step into that team due to an injury or for absences of other kinds, that she's the perfect utility in old sort of 90s footy speak. She can kind of bat anywhere.
Danny Southern.
The Andy Gowers of she can be put in the top 6 comfortably. She can bowl her 4 overs or her 10 overs easily. She's a match winner. We've seen that with what she's done both in Western Australia and Tasmania, making 100 in the WNCL final. And I'm glad that counts for something. I'm glad it counts for something that, you do something in a big final and it matters. Let's ignore the fact that
Unless you're Amanda Wellington,
who was player of the match in the WBBL final this year, of course, because, that's what she does. But yeah, look, it's such a strong team, incredibly hard team to get into. If I was to be, they're allowed to give one more contract out in the MOU. They've got to give out between 15 and 18. They've given out 17. Surely this team deserves all 18 contracts to be given out, remembering that you can get them incrementally. So Molyneux, who was always coming back onto the contract list, she's done so well since returning to the side from her knee injury. She got one incrementally last year. So, and that's in addition to the 18, if I understand it correctly. And I'm pretty sure I do. So this team being as good as it is, why would you not just, Wellington or someone else? getting the chance, or even a younger player who they're trying to bring through. Anyway, that's probably not hugely important. Those T20s I mentioned before, 161 for 8, Australia made when Wareham made 50, then Bangladesh 103 for 9. So a fairly familiar theme there. Gardner and Molyneux 3 wickets each in that comfortable defence, and almost a replica in the final T20. Australia 155 for 6, Healy 45 in a hurry at the top, McGrath 44 not out in a hurry at the end. Bangladesh all out 78, unfortunately, to end the series. Jyoti, the captain, making 32 from 31. She's never going to quit. She never gives up. But unfortunately, the depth just isn't there. Taylor Valamick, 3 for 12 from 4. So really leading that attack in the final game. Georgia Wareham picked up 2 for 1 at the end. Good for the stats. And this probably ticked every box, Jeff, across the 2.5, 3 weeks they were there. They won every game. They did so easily, and they've conditioned themselves pretty well for the World Cup in Bangladesh in T20 cricket later this year. And of course, for Bangladesh, there's upside too. They've been soundly beaten, but they've had their moments, and the experience of playing against the greatest women's cricket team ever assembled can only be a good thing for them into the future.
Yeah, well, at least, presuming they come up against Australia in the World Cup, that won't be unfamiliar. Yep. There'll be less chance of just being overawed in that moment. And I suppose for Australia, they would have been expecting to win all those games, but it's given them a chance to look at the conditions, figure out how they want to bat and bowl on those kind of surfaces that they'll have later in the year. Winning away from home, difficult thing to do. Sri Lanka's women just knocked over South Africa.
Done it again.
They're playing their first ODI right now, actually, but they played 3 T20s. They completed 3 T20s after we'd recorded last week, and they got smashed in the first game as well. Conceded 198. Laura Woolvart made her first T20 century. Marizanne Kapp made 60 off 40 balls, and Sri Lanka were all out for 119, 6 wicket takers. So a thrashing. And in the second game, so much of the time Sri Lanka's success rides on Chamari Atapattu making most of the runs. She's out cheaply in the chase. And you're thinking, well, surely that's it. Surely that's over. And Sri Lanka come back to win it. This feels hugely significant, really. So the second game, South Africa made 137. Annika Bosch up top with a fast 50. Marizanne Kapp, first drop, makes 44. She's just worked her way up and up and up the order over the last few years. The Sri Lankan spinners mostly through the middle squeeze it reasonably well. Adapatu contributes with the ball, 1 for 18 off 4. Prabhadani, the left-arm medium bowler who can swing it a fair bit. So she opens up, she bowls an important over in the middle, and she bowls the last over of the game, concedes only 2 boundaries and takes a wicket. Remarkable performance there.
Good cricketer. And also got one of the most satisfying names to say in all of world cricket, Yudhishika Prabhadani. But I've loved watching her. Again, we're mentioning Fairbreak a bit in this segment, but she's played in both of those tournaments with her left arm swing. Right. So I'm not surprised to hear that moving the ball around, she was a threat at the start and skillful enough to close it out at the end.
Yeah, but, generally you'd think 137 should be enough, especially when Adapatu is out for 6. Not only out for 6, but she takes 5 overs to make those 6 runs. She's going nowhere. And that should be it, right? Sri Lanka are generally a bit frail in the batting without Adapatu, although they have been improving recently. But the other opener, Vishmi Gunaratne, makes 65. Not a quick 65, just above a run a ball, which isn't going to be enough to bridge that gap. But Kavisha Dilhari comes in and lights things up. She's still only 23 years old. She's been around forever. You would remember her from the T20 World Cup in 2020.
Yep.
She debuted in 2018, Dilari. She debuted as a teenager. For a fair while, she was the one younger player in a much older team. They brought through a few more into the squad since then. But she makes 45 from 28, and that's enough to make up the gap and get them home in that chase. And then the third T20, bigger chase of 156. Teen Wolf makes 56. Nadine de Klerk makes 44, not out quickly at the end. But it's hard to get through a T20 series without Chamari Atapatu making a contribution with the bat in at least one of them. 73 from 46 balls, 5 sixes along the way, and gets support, importantly, from another of these sort of younger generation. So Harshita Samaravikrama is still only 25. She's been playing for years, but hasn't been a complete lock in the team, but she's been there and thereabouts, certainly for the last few years, and played a couple of games as early as 2016. But she makes 54, and crucially, she's 54 not out after Adapatu gets out. And there is a wobble, so they're 102 for 1, and then they lose 5 wickets between successfully completing the chase and then the other five, the five who get out, make 23 between them. And that includes 2 wickets falling with the scores level. So lucky that Summer Vikrama's still there, gets them home with 5 balls to spare. And yeah, they win it 2-1 after beating England not that long ago in a T20 series, after beating New Zealand in an ODI series not too long ago. And South Africa, on the other hand, since they made that World Cup final at home, the T20 World Cup final, the last one, they lost T20 series to Pakistan away, to Australia at home, and they drew at home 1-1 with Bangladesh and 1-1 with New Zealand, with games washed out in those series. Now they've lost to Sri Lanka. So, yeah, haven't won a T20 series since they made that World Cup final.
Yeah, not surprised to see South Africa are struggling for the reasons that we talked about probably this time last year with losing players and so on. But it's all about Sri Lanka, isn't it? You're right. I think that's, by my mathematics, or my memory at least, I should say, the third away series win in 9 months. So I reckon that the New Zealand win was around...
New Zealand was at home. New Zealand was in Sri Lanka, the ODI.
Oh, was it in Sri Lanka? My apologies. I thought they beat them in New Zealand. Nevertheless, to beat New Zealand and to hold their nerve there after I think they were 1-1, then won the third. England, terrific come from behind achievement, having dropped the first one and won the next 2. And now doing it against South Africa in the third T20. It says a bit about their development, remembering that they nearly beat Australia at the T20 World Cup at the WACA in 2021, which would have bounced Australia from the tournament. So they've always had enough talent there. And yes, they're all built around Chamari Atapatu, who, by the way, had to put out a clarifying statement this week. There was a suggestion from something she put on Facebook that she might retire. And she's now said that she's going to consider where she's at after the T20 World Cup later this year. Atapatu's 34. She's never been better. She was the captain of the ICC Team of the Year for 2023. She's absolutely at the peak of her powers. I don't know. I would hate to think that she's thinking about ending her international career in order to give herself more space to make money in T20 land. Not that I'm against her maximising every possible financial opportunity. She should absolutely do that. She's been an absolute veteran star, dedicated as much as anyone to Sri Lankan women's cricket. But I hope there's a way of managing all interests there so that she can keep doing her thing for as long as she's playing the game and can make money outside of that at the same time.
Yeah, well, we know how little, how negligible the payment is for that Sri Lankan women's team. And, it's improved a little bit, it's my understanding, the last couple of years, but years and years and years before that of basically playing for free. So
I think match payments are, someone told me last year, I feel like it's $250 USD per game. So that's in addition to a modest national contract. And that goes further in Sri Lanka than it would in where we're from. But still, the wider point remains that that wealth in women's cricket, hopefully they find a way of distributing it more equitably than has been the case in men's cricket.
New Zealand and England women also finished off their one-day series, the last couple of ODIs there. They were playing 5 of those. Pretty similar trajectory, although different results in the end both times. England had a very limp collapse through the middle order and got bailed out by Amy Jones. In the 4th ODI, she had Tammy Beaumont, who'd opened, stick around as well and make 81. So that made all the difference there as they were able to, England were able to get up to 252, despite looking like they'd be all out for under 200 at one point. New Zealand didn't chase it, although Halliday made 57, who we've been talking about a bit over the last couple of weeks. Nat Sivabrunt 3 for 21 in that game, bowled out New Zealand for 196. And then New Zealand returned the favour, bowled out England for 194 in the last game. Similar sort of thing. The collapse was there, except there was nobody to take the Beaumont role. Amy Jones did make 50 down at number 7, and they were 68 for 5 when she came in, but she wasn't able to do the job pretty much on her own. Although there was a partnership, but it wasn't. It wasn't enough to get them up to something really convincing. And then Sophie Devine and Millie Kerr in the chase took care of that pretty comfortably in the end. There were a couple of sort of quarter chances here and there, but I was watching that game and Devine seemed very calm in taking it through. She ended up at 88. She was on 88 when they needed 12 to win, so she did what Sophie Devine does and popped a couple of sixes over the fence and brought up 100 and won the game. She took Charlie Dean to pieces through that innings, Adam, by the way.
Did she?
Every time Charlie Dean came on, Devine was like, "You're shit. You're going for 6." like multiple times as soon as she saw Dean. She was like, shit off spin, see you later. So Eccleston bowled quite well, but had a foot problem at one point. But yeah, Dean got absolutely smoked.
This is the problem, you see, because Dean's not a shit bowler at all. She's a gorgeous bowler. And some batters can mitigate how good a finger spinner you are, I suppose, especially when you're bowling right arm off spin.
People get smashed by Sophie Devine.
Yeah, right arm off spinner to Devine hitting with the spin, as she's done to so many bowlers across her international and domestic careers. Remember those early days of the Big Bash, that she was the one who sort of changed the tempo that the Big Bash went at in seasons 1, 2, and 3. And now everyone has, every team has players that can do that, but she was the first, I suppose. And she missed a number of those games in the middle of the series with that quad strain after coming back from the WPL. So Devine at her best, clearly still the most important player in that New Zealand side. She's probably 35 now, I reckon, Sophie, or near enough to that. So gets them one game back. They won one T20 and one one-dayer. But, you know, they'll go to the World Cup later this year, and barring something extraordinary, they won't make it through to the semi-finals. And as I mentioned on the show last week, there's still a gulf between where New Zealand could be and where New Zealand are, and that's largely a question of being behind the eight ball on funding, and they're going to have to play a game of catch-up along with a series of other countries where Australia and England keep investing more and more each year. And India are coming quickly, and we've already talked about what Sri Lanka are doing with their limited resources. New Zealand in the middle of all of that. Well, they're just not anywhere near it anymore when they should be.
A bit of a merry-go-round at Sheffield Shield level. We talked about Jason Gillespie leaving his coaching contract with South Australia a year early. Nic Maddinson's going back to New South Wales after all of the fun and games when he came down to play for Victoria, made 300s in 3 games when he came back from that knee surgery, had the broken arm problem as well, made a bunch of hundreds in between, bits and pieces of missing with injury here and there, played some Australia A stuff, but now he's heading home to don the light blue and become a New South Wales Speed Blitz Blue once again.
What a great record he's enjoyed for Victoria, by the way. He made 10 centuries in 37 matches for the Vics and 10 other scores above 50, so that's all up an average of 51. But yeah, when he was there, when he was available, remembering he missed a bunch of cricket with that ACL knee problem. I think he missed like nearly 12 months of cricket, but came back with those 3 centuries to end the Victorian Sheffield Shield season. So that's a big get for New South Wales, and yeah, maybe it'll be baggy green in the brown paper bag with the baggy blue as it used to be, as David Hooks once famously said. Maybe not, but I think that going home makes sense for him, I'm sure, being back where he's from originally for the last part of his career. He's above 30 now. He's 32, I think. He wasn't far away from the Test team as a 20-something, a young 20-something. When they picked George Bailey for the 13-14 Ashes, Maddinson was one of the players they were looking at very closely. He made runs in the 2013 Australia A Tour of England. It feels a million years ago, but made a big 100 at Gloucestershire on that trip. So, one to watch there. Other movements, we're seeing Ryan Josh Philippe going to New South Wales as well, which again stands to reason given he already plays with the Sixers in the T20 stuff, and he can't get the gloves because Josh Inglis is there in the Shield team. So while Josh Inglis remains the understudy,
Inglis will be away a lot.
But while he remains the understudy, but during the Shield season at the start of the year, Inglis will be keeping, which means Philippe. Cruel intentions can't. Philippe can't get the gloves enough to advance in his career. So there's some other movements around the margins, but they're the bigger ones with Maddinson back to New South Wales. I do think he'll have a Test career. I think he'll get there. I don't know
he's already had one.
I think he'll have one that's substantial, more than the cameo he had at number 6 back in 2016 around that dramatic phase when they sacked half the side and went to him and a couple of others. I think he'll have a proper run at it. Maybe when Kawaja retires. When Kawaja retires, they might look at Maddinson as another left-hander, another mature, experienced left-hander. I don't know. Watch this space. The fact that he'll be at New South Wales certainly won't hurt, put it that way.
Marcus Harris might commit a murder if that happens. if you're like, we need a mature, experienced left-hander, someone who's worked on his game at first-class level, someone who's had a previous shot at Test cricket, shown some promise. Who fits that bill? Who fits that description? Who could it? There's only one player it could be, Nic Maddinson. Somehow they they came up with that calculus back in 2016 too. Or we need an aggressive player who can take the game on at number 6. Who could it be? It starts with M. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Maddinson. Full Maxi.
Yeah. Well,
all right,
we'll
Jeff. Before we go to our second break and the IPL wrap that'll follow to round out the show, I touched on this before briefly, but just another little shove. If you're the kind of person who might be inclined to chip into the Final Word Lords Taverners marathon campaign, please do so. I'm getting, and you're in the group as well, Jeff. We are getting so many reports of people working their asses off in training. It's just a wonderful thing to be part of. We had 2 more people sign up to the 10K this week, which is pretty cool. So I think that we're in full fundraising mode now. We've hit the £5,000 mark. It tends to be the case that money for these things comes late, and that's fine. I'm at peace with this being 5 out of 30 right now. But I'd love the Final Word community to help maybe get us to the next 5. Get us to 10,000 in the next week. Play your role. Chip some money in the tin. Support the Lord's Taverners, a charity that you know all about. 75 years they've been in operation. And I mentioned on the show last week that the number of people they help in a year. I've got something here which I'll actually bring up. I'll pad for time for 5 seconds while I bring it up on my phone. But they put out a statement a couple of weeks ago which went through all of their achievements from last year. Let me give you some of these, Jeff. They reached nearly 23,000 young people last year facing the challenges of inequity in their programs. 91% of participants felt more active, 88% more confident, 92% more included. Super Ones became available in every county, Scotland and Wales as well, 1 year ahead of schedule. They had 2 Super Ones alumni make their debut for England in the learning disabilities team. So again, we're seeing the Lord's Tavs work turn into something at the elite level as well. 42% increase in female participation in their programs, which is terrific. The hubs have increased by 30%. All told, this is the time. Jump on the link. It's in the show notes to contribute to the half marathon fundraising campaign, and that run, that weekend is at the end of May.
All right. Very good. Info in the show notes. We'll be back in a sec.